When you share a roof with someone, you expect comfort, companionship, maybe even friendship. But sometimes, behind the closed doors of shared apartments and dimly lit hallways, darkness lives where trust should be. Tonight, we unravel 7 bone-chilling true stories from people who once thought they knew the person sleeping just a few feet away. Get comfortable, or not. These are the roommate horror stories that may keep you up all night. Story 1: The Roommate Who Never Slept. I moved to Boston for grad school and found a reasonably priced 2-bedroom apartment on Craigslist. The other room was already taken by a girl named Lila, a soft-spoken, pale woman in her mid-20s. She said she was a freelance illustrator and often worked at night. That was fine by me. I was a night owl too, buried in research and textbooks. At first, it was small things. I'd wake up to find kitchen cabinets open, even though I always closed them. My bedroom door would creak open in the middle of the night, despite me locking it before bed. I figured it was just the old apartment settling, or I was too exhausted to remember things correctly. But what truly unsettled me was Lila's presence. No matter what time I got up, 2 a.m., 4 a.m., even 6 a.m., she was always awake, sitting perfectly still on the couch, sketching in the dark with the TV flickering on static. I never saw her eat. I never heard her shower. One night, I came home late from the library and found her standing in the hallway, facing the wall. No movement. Just standing. I said, "Hey, Lila," trying not to startle her. She didn't move. I gently touched her shoulder, and she whispered, without turning around, "She's in your room now." I laughed nervously, thinking maybe she was talking in her sleep, or just joking. But when I entered my room, the air felt heavy, oppressive. My books were scattered on the floor, and a drawing was pinned to my wall. It was a sketch of me, sleeping, with something tall and thin standing at the foot of my bed. I confronted Lila the next morning, but she looked confused and claimed she didn't remember anything. That night, I decided to set up my phone to record while I slept. I wanted to know if I was sleepwalking or if someone was messing with me. The next day, I watched the footage. Around 3:17 a.m., my door creaked open. Lila walked in, her eyes rolled back, her limbs twitching unnaturally. She stood at my bedside for 5 full minutes, staring down at me. Then she turned toward the camera, and whispered, "She's watching you too." Her smile was inhuman. Too wide. Too still. I packed my things and left that day. I didn't even ask for my deposit back. Months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. It was Lila's voice. "You left before she was done with you." I blocked the number, but sometimes, when I'm up late studying, I still feel someone watching from the dark corner of the room. If you've ever lived with someone who made your skin crawl, Tell us in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? Story 2, The Locked Door Across the Hall. A couple of years ago, I was attending college in a small town in Oregon. I couldn't afford the dorms, so I found an off-campus apartment with 3 other students. The rent was dirt cheap, but there was a catch: one of the bedrooms in the unit was permanently locked. According to the landlord, it had been used for storage by a previous tenant who disappeared suddenly, and out of respect, the family didn't want the room disturbed. Seemed a little strange, but at the time, I just needed a roof over my head. We all agreed to leave it alone. Things were normal the first few weeks. But soon, odd things started happening. At night, I'd hear soft thumping from inside that locked room. It wasn't constant, just the occasional knock or scratch, like someone shifting in bed or dragging their fingernails along the wall. One of my roommates joked that the room was haunted. We laughed it off. But none of us could explain the cold air that seeped out from under the door, or how the light beneath it sometimes flickered even though there was no power connected in that room. One night, we were all watching a movie when we heard a crash from the hallway. We ran over and saw that the hallway mirror had fallen and it had shattered in a perfect circle, as if punched out from the other side. Then something even stranger happened. When I looked at the broken mirror, I swore I saw a face in the shards, pale, wide-eyed, and pressed against the other side of that locked door. From then on, the atmosphere changed. One of my roommates, Tim, started sleepwalking, always stopping in front of the locked door and mumbling something under his breath. Another, Jess, started waking up with deep scratches on her arms. We tried to rationalize it: stress, paranoia, maybe even pests, but deep down, we knew something was terribly wrong. One stormy night, we heard loud banging coming from inside the locked room. Real, rhythmic pounding, like fists slamming against the walls. The lights flickered violently. Jess was crying. Tim was whispering again, "Let her out. Let her out." I don't know what came over me, but I grabbed a hammer and pried the door open. The lock gave way with a screech. Inside, the room was empty, except for a twin bed with deep claw marks on the walls around it. The sheets were old, stained, and matted with what looked like hair. There were dozens of childlike drawings pinned up, each one of a dark-haired girl standing in a doorway, eyes blacked out. One drawing was newer. It showed 4 figures, me and my roommates, standing outside the room, while a 5th figure grinned from behind the door. The landlord refused to speak with us about the room. We moved out that week. I tried researching the previous tenant. All I found was a missing persons notice for a 9-year-old girl named Elise who vanished from that building 10 years ago. Sometimes, I still dream about her. Standing in a doorway. Whispering, "It's my room now." Trusting someone enough to share your space is terrifying in itself. Have you ever noticed something you couldn't explain? Let us know. Story 3, the voice that wasn't mine. 2 years ago, I moved into a 3-bedroom apartment near downtown with 2 other guys I met on a college housing board, Chris and Devin. It wasn't anything special: beige walls, creaky floors, paper-thin walls. But the location was perfect and the rent manageable. We all had our quirks. Chris was quiet and kept to himself, always wearing headphones. Devin, on the other hand, was loud and social. I was somewhere in between. Despite our differences, we got along well. Until I started hearing myself talk, when I wasn't. It started on a random Tuesday night. I was alone in my room, scrolling through my phone, when Devin knocked on my door. He looked annoyed. "Dude, what do you want?" he asked. I was confused. "What do you mean?" "You just called my name like 5 times, he said. Sounded urgent. I hadn't said a word. I laughed it off, thinking maybe he was joking. But he looked dead serious. A few nights later, Chris said the same thing. He walked into the kitchen, pale and visibly shaken, and asked why I'd been mumbling outside his door at 3 a.m. I hadn't left my bed. That's when I decided to test something. One night, I set up my phone on voice record and left it running overnight, hidden behind my lamp. The next morning, I listened to the playback while getting ready. At 2:43 a.m., clear as day, I heard my own voice whispering, "Devin, come here. I need help." But I had been asleep. The timestamp proved it. Even stranger, the voice wasn't coming from inside my room. The acoustics tinny, distant suggested it was coming from the hallway, just outside Devin's door. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't tell anyone yet. Until things got worse. One night, Chris burst into my room, sweating and shaking. "There's something wrong in this place," he whispered. He played me a recording he had taken on his laptop while studying. It was faint, but there again was my voice, muttering, repeating the same word over and over. "Leave." But I had been at work all night. My time card and my manager would vouch for that. Devin started sleeping at his girlfriend's. Chris left a week later without a word, just packed and vanished in the middle of the night. I tried to hold it together. I set up a camera this time. A simple webcam aimed at the hallway. The footage showed my bedroom door opening around 3:12 a.m. I walk out. Or rather, something that looked exactly like me walked out. But here's the catch: I never left my bed. I was still in it. Clearly asleep. 2 of me. One asleep. One standing in the hallway, whispering into Devin's old room. I moved out the next day. Never looked back. But I still have the footage. I keep it on an encrypted drive, because every time I try to upload it or share it with someone, the file gets corrupted. And sometimes, When I wake up in the middle of the night, I hear my own voice outside my new door, whispering things I've never said. Sometimes, it's not ghosts you should fear, it's the people you let into your life. Hit the like button if that gave you chills. Story 4, The Locked Door That Opened Itself. Last fall, I moved in with a friend of a friend named Jake. We were both working night shifts at different hospitals in Seattle, so the apartment stayed mostly quiet during the day. I worked in the ER, he worked in a psych ward. Jake was chill, clean, and we rarely got in each other's way. His room was at the end of the hall, always locked when he wasn't home. He told me he had some valuable stuff in there, so I respected his privacy. At first, everything felt normal. About 2 weeks in, I came home from my shift early around 3 a.m. and found Jake's door slightly ajar. That was odd, because I had literally seen him lock it before heading out earlier that evening. Thinking he might have returned and forgotten to lock up, I called out, "Jake." No answer. I peeked inside. The room was empty, pitch black. Nothing seemed disturbed, except for a small wooden box sitting on the desk. I hadn't seen it before. As I leaned in, the lid of the box creaked open, by itself. Startled, I stepped back and shut the door. I texted Jake, "Hey man, I think your door popped open. Nothing's touched, just letting you know." He replied almost instantly, "I locked it. Don't go in there." That reply sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't even said I entered. Over the next week, things started happening. I'd wake up to faint tapping sounds coming from down the hall. Sometimes I'd find the door slightly open again, even though I never touched it. One night, I heard what sounded like low humming from inside Jake's room, deep, droning, like a man chanting under his breath. I brought it up casually. "Hey Jake, you play music while you're gone or something?" He went dead silent. Then said, "Don't go near my room when I'm not home." That night, I heard knocking. Not on the front door, not on my bedroom wall, but from inside Jake's room. I couldn't sleep. Curiosity got the better of me. I waited until Jake left for work, then I stood outside his door, holding my breath. The door was locked again. Good. But something inside scratched the other side soft, steady, like nails dragging across wood. Then I heard a whisper. A woman's voice. "Let me out." I ran to my room, locked the door, and didn't move for hours. Later that night, Jake came home. I confronted him. I told him I heard something. Someone. He stared at me. Then asked, calmly, "Did you let her out?" I laughed nervously. "Who are you talking about?" He didn't smile. "There's a reason I locked that room. I don't need you making it worse." He left again the next night. And like clockwork, the door opened on its own. Only this time, it slammed against the wall. I crept down the hallway, phone camera rolling, and peeked inside. The wooden box on his desk had moved. It was now on the floor, lid open. And there was a single handprint smeared across the inside of the door. The next morning, Jake was gone. Not just from the apartment, he quit his job. His room was empty. Everything gone except the box. I called, texted, emailed, nothing. I moved out 2 days later. Last week, I got a package. No return address. Inside, that same wooden box. Still open. Now, I keep hearing that voice again. From my closet. Not all monsters hide under the bed, some sleep in the room next to yours. Subscribe if you want more stories that haunt your nights. Story 5, My Roommate's Nightly Conversations. About 3 months ago, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Minneapolis with an old college friend, Darren. He was a quiet guy, a bit reclusive, but always polite. I needed a cheap place to stay during my internship, and he needed help with rent, so it worked out. Darren worked during the day, and I worked the night shift at a local print shop. Our schedules barely overlapped, except on the weekends. We weren't close, but we got along just fine. That was until I started hearing Darren talking, in the middle of the night. At first, I assumed he was talking in his sleep. Around 2 or 3 a.m., when I'd return home from work, I'd pass by his room and hear muffled voices. Just low murmurs. I thought maybe he was on the phone or watching something with headphones in. But the lights were always off. The door always closed. No flickering glow of a screen. Just voices. One night, curiosity got the better of me. I leaned close to the door. I heard 2 voices. One was clearly Darren's soft, whispering. The other was deeper, raspy, like it was struggling to speak. Yes. I will be ready. I will be ready. I froze. There was no one else in the apartment. From then on, things only got weirder. I started noticing little changes in the apartment. Scratches on Darren's bedroom door. The doorknob was ice cold every time I touched it, like the room behind it wasn't just dark, but lifeless. I found scraps of paper in the trash with odd, frantic handwriting. Not yet. It's not ready yet. He can't know. He mustn't. I tried to brush it off. Maybe Darren was working on a screenplay, or journaling some weird dream. But every night, the conversations lasted longer. One night, I heard him crying. And a second voice, comforting him in a language I didn't recognize. I couldn't take it anymore. One Saturday night, I decided to stay awake and record the sounds. I sat in the dark kitchen, watching Darren's door. At 2:43 a.m., it began clearer than ever. The raspy voice, "Let me in." Darren, whispering, "I'm scared. I don't want to do this anymore." The voice again, "You promised. You brought him here." My heart stopped. Me. Suddenly, Darren's door creaked open by itself. There was no one inside. Just a large, old mirror propped against the far wall, directly facing the doorway. And in the mirror, I saw two people standing behind me. When I spun around, there was no one there. The next morning, Darren was gone. No clothes, no wallet, no phone. Police came, searched the place, no signs of struggle. Just bare footprints in the dust leading from his room to the front door. The mirror was still there, with a handprint pressed against the glass, from the inside. I moved out that night. A week ago, I finally opened the audio file from that night to delete it. But at the end, I heard a whisper I hadn't noticed before. Darren's voice. "He's the new one now. Watch him." That was unsettling. If you're still watching with the lights off, you're braver than most. Share this with someone who needs a reason to check their locks tonight. Story 6, The Locked Room That Wasn't Locked. Back in 2021, I moved to Portland for grad school and found a cheap room through a sublease ad. The apartment had 3 bedrooms. I'd be moving in with a guy named Miles, who already lived there, and a girl named Jody, who had just signed the lease. It wasn't perfect, the place was old, creaky, and a little too quiet, but I was broke, and it was what I could afford. There was one thing about the apartment that always bothered me, though. There was a 4th room, tucked in the back of the hall, always locked. Miles told me it was just a storage room the landlord kept sealed. Not ours to worry about. At first, I didn't. I started hearing things after my first month, mostly at night, when everyone else was asleep. Low thuds. Dragging sounds. Sometimes what sounded like whispering. It always came from that locked room. Jody heard it too. Once, she knocked on my door and whispered, "You hear it too, right?" I nodded. She looked scared, but we both laughed it off like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. One morning, I saw the door slightly ajar. Miles swore it was impossible. He even showed us the padlock, thick and solid. "Must have been the wind," he muttered. But we were on the 2nd floor, and there were no open windows in that hallway. We started noticing things missing from our rooms. A sock here. A single shoe. A coffee mug. Nothing valuable, just little things that made you feel like someone was watching. One night, I stayed up late working on a paper. Around 2 a.m., I went to the kitchen for a snack. As I passed the hallway, I heard something scrape behind the locked door, then a knock. 3 slow knocks, deliberate and heavy. I froze. Another knock. Then, a voice. Faint, but clear. Help me. I backed away. Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I ran to Miles' room, banged on his door. When he opened it, I told him what I heard. He looked pale. I heard it too, he whispered. Last week. Why didn't you say anything? He glanced toward the hallway. Because the last person who asked about that room he left just disappeared. No warning. His stuff's still in the basement. The next night, Jody was gone. Her bedroom light was on, her phone still charging. But she wasn't home. We waited. Called. Texted. Nothing. That night, around 3 a.m., I heard sobbing. Coming from the locked room. When I approached the door, I felt something wrong. The air was cold, heavier than normal. The sobbing grew louder. Please, help, he won't let me out. I grabbed a flashlight and looked at the lock. It wasn't locked anymore. The padlock was undone, hanging loose. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. The room was completely dark, except for a thin beam of moonlight from a high window. And in the middle of the room, there was a hole. Not like a broken floorboard, a literal black void in the wooden floor, like reality itself had cracked. As I stepped closer, the sobbing stopped. Then something crawled out of the hole. Long limbs. Skin too pale. Hollow eyes. Wearing Jody's hoodie. It looked up at me and smiled. I slammed the door and locked it. Called Miles. He didn't answer. I ran to his room and found it empty. Like he had never lived there at all. No clothes. No bed. Just dust. The next morning, I tried to explain to the landlord. He looked confused. There's no fourth room, he said. Only 3 bedrooms in that unit. I insisted. He came with me, opened the door at the end of the hallway. It was a blank wall. No door. I swear, it was there. I lived with it. But now it's gone. I moved out the same day. Left most of my stuff behind. Every once in a while, I hear knocking in my dreams. 3 slow knocks. And a voice that whispers, "You saw me. Now you belong here too." Just how well do you really know your roommate? Comment your answer, and maybe, double check your room before bed. Story 7, The Mirror in His Room. A couple of years ago, I moved to Chicago for a new job and ended up sharing a 2-bedroom apartment with a guy named Jordan. We found each other through a roommate app. He seemed normal enough. A little quiet, maybe, but respectful. Clean. Paid rent on time. That was enough for me. The apartment was on the top floor of an old brownstone. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, and a long, narrow hallway that led to our bedrooms. Mine was on the left. His was all the way at the end. From the beginning, there was one thing I found odd: the massive antique mirror in his room. It took up nearly the entire wall opposite his bed, like something from a Victorian mansion. Black and gold frame. Tinted glass that didn't quite reflect properly. It looked too old to be in a rental apartment. He never explained where he got it. When I asked, he shrugged and said, "Came with me from home. I like it." That was all. The first weird thing started about 2 weeks in. I was lying in bed one night when I heard whispering from the hallway. Faint, breathy voices like two people murmuring just beyond my door. I thought Jordan was on a call or something, but when I opened my door, the hallway was empty. His door was shut. Light off. I texted him, "You up?" He replied instantly, "Nah man, just crashed." Why? I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure what to say. I began noticing something even stranger. Whenever I passed his slightly open bedroom door, if the mirror was visible from the hallway, I could see movement in it. Flickers. Shadows. A person standing there, but never Jordan. I tried to tell myself it was tricks of the light, reflections from windows, whatever. But it started happening more frequently. And the thing is, Jordan was never in the room when it happened. Then one day, I came home early. Jordan wasn't there. His door was wide open. I peeked inside. And for a split second, I saw my own reflection in the mirror, but it wasn't moving like me. I had stopped at the doorway. The reflection kept walking into the room. It turned its head slowly to look at me. Then it smiled. I slammed the door shut and ran to my room. One night, I heard Jordan talking to himself. Loudly. Except, it didn't sound like him. His voice was deeper. Slower. Repeating something over and over. I crept down the hallway and listened. He was chanting. "Let me out. Let me in. Let me out. Let me in." Then silence. Suddenly, his door opened. He stood there, staring at me. Barefoot. Pale. His eyes, they didn't look like his eyes. Like something else was wearing him. "You shouldn't watch," he said. "It sees you when you look." I backed away. He walked back in and closed the door. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, he acted like nothing happened. I moved out a week later. I had to. But a few months later, I got curious, too curious. I messaged the new tenant who moved in after me. I told him I used to live there and asked if he ever saw anything strange, especially in the back bedroom. He replied, "You mean the one with the giant mirror? Yeah, it's weird. But I don't live with anyone. I rented the whole place alone." I froze. I wrote back, "Wait. The guy before you, Jordan? Tall, black hair. His answer came a minute later. There was no Jordan on the lease. The landlord said no one lived there before me for at least a year. That bedroom was locked when I moved in. Empty. Except for that mirror. I haven't replied since. And sometimes, late at night, I still see that mirror in my dreams. And the reflection that smiles back isn't mine. You survived all 7 stories barely. If your heart's still beating, give this video a like, and let us know which story chilled you the most. When you share a roof with someone, you expect comfort, companionship, maybe even friendship. But sometimes, behind the closed doors of shared apartments and dimly lit hallways, darkness lives where trust should be. Tonight, we unravel 7 bone-chilling true stories from people who once thought they knew the person sleeping just a few feet away. Get comfortable, or not. These are the roommate horror stories that may keep you up all night.